My name is Mandefro. I am a PhD student at Concordia in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. I'm enrolled in the program called Social and Cultural Analysis. I'm an international student from Ethiopia, and I'm an international student at Concordia. And of course, I'm a Black immigrant international student, and those three identities are very much, intertwined to make me kind of vulnerable to racism. But of course, I'm not only, sort of vulnerable to racism as a man and someone who came here at Concordia as an international student with scholarships. Means also have also, kind of privileges, but I think the overall experience within the broader world of, racism, I'm still, one person who can be vulnerable to racism and have been vulnerable to racist action is not only Canada, but from my experience in the past studying abroad in Europe and so on. But beyond that, I think I'm a social worker. By training, I did a bachelor degree in sociology and then a master's in social work before I came to Concordia for my PhD. And the Anti-Racist Project is very meaningful in my professional endeavor. I stand for justice as a social worker, and that's something I would like to sign on and contribute to. I think the COVID has affected both my experience as an international student and as human rights defender in a negative, so to say, way, and I would like to highlight that experience. And of course, this is because as an international student, I have a limited legal entitlements here in Canada and a limited support network outside the university, which means that the university system is the main source of support for me and people like me. So I would like to talk about what does it mean to be an international student and do human rights advocacy back home, and I would like to bring those two into one and see in what ways the two are intertwined, and also how that might affect my experience as an immigrant here. The human rights situation in Ethiopia has deteriorated because of COVID. That's because the election has been postponed because of the COVID emergency or public health crisis, and as a result of that, there is rising political tension and friction within the country because some groups believe that the government is using the COVID crisis as a way of postponing its power, and it's using it as a pretext to kind of push the election and stay on power. There's also election in addition to the postponement of election. I think there's a COVID related state of emergency, and as part of COVID response, so because of that, there is restrictions on what you can do and what you cannot do. There's a sort of regulation that was introduced in the federal government, and that has led to obviously restrictions. Some of them justified because obviously the government would like to contain the pandemic, and that's understandable, and that's not unique to Ethiopia. But also, in addition to that, I think there was attempts by police forces to unjustifiably kind of coerce and restrict citizens' rights, like the police beating people and arresting people for allegedly violating this state of emergency that was declared following the COVID crisis. So some of it is obviously, some of these restrictions are understandable, but what happened was the government and some institutions have used this COVID crisis to intensify their suppression of citizens' rights, and that has resulted in the need for more activism and more, mobilization of people around, human rights. So because of that, over the last, over the last 6 months, rather, I think there is not only me, but many other international students, Ethiopian origin international students, doing a lot of activism on human rights. And of course, the COVID has also impacted us as international students. There's a lot of anxiety. All of us are far away from our families. We don't know what's happening. We are very worried about, family members getting the COVID, and what would happen if one or more of our family members, even here, are ill. There's limited access to information, obviously, because of language barrier here, and particularly in my case in Quebec, because I don't speak French, and I think it's fair to say that the Quebec government has done a fair job in terms of providing information in English, but that's not always the case. Like, for instance, I received the COVID booklet produced by the Quebec government in English way months later into the pandemic. I think it was in May or June, while the French version was released earlier. It is also, not only anxiety of getting the disease, but also I think an important aspect of that is the feeling that I don't have the up-to-date information about what's happening in terms of how this virus transmits and what kind of measures I should take to make sure that I'm safe from the virus. So there's a lot of uncertainty, of course, in there that comes with what's going to happen if I catch the virus, but also what's going to happen to my immigration status since travel restrictions are in place and I cannot travel to Ethiopia. Or it's very difficult to travel to Ethiopia right now. So overall, there's a lack of, or challenge to focus on school and be productive. So the combined impact of this is, I think, I would say, an emotional toll, kind of, pressure and a double burden of being, an international student in a different country, but also very much involved in speaking up against some of the human rights violations in Ethiopia as a result of COVID. I think the combined effect is something that is, I would say, perhaps not discussed that much. There's considerable discussion about international students, particularly when it comes to legal aspect, but not so much when it comes to international students that are also, very much involved in human rights activism in their home country, and that's why I think I would like to bring this to the attention of more people, to talk about. Yes, we're primarily international students, and there's a need to support us, but also we're not just the students. Some of us are very active in human rights issues. I've been going on media to talk about this human rights violations and different kinds of atrocities committed against minorities in Ethiopia. I am involved in leadership in community organizations here in the diaspora. I'm also involved in documenting these human rights violations and sharing them to international human rights organizations. And all this is, very important to me and what I stand for, and my professional identity and my, personal identity as a Black immigrant here. So I cannot just focus on school, even if I want to. And I think there is a need to recognize this multiple layers of engagement for international students, and there is a need to give more attention to the different ways they're engaging to events unfolding back home, and not just in the school or in the country they're currently based at. I think there's a need for universities to be more attentive in terms of the immigration status of students. I know we receive myself and others, my friends in other universities receive messages urging us to make sure that we are legally in Canada and all our immigration documents are up to date and all that. But I think there's limited, there's only, few things international students can do when international travel is not as we know it before COVID. And I think the first thing I would say is there's more need from administration side to support international students in helping them to resolve these challenges, immigration-related challenges, because that's a very basic one, but the most important one. And I know for many international students, there's anxiety around that. Like, what would happen if I cannot renew my study permit because my passport has expired and I cannot go back to my country to renew my passport? Those things, I think, require more attention from the administration side. And of course, I think there's a need to recognize that international students are not just the students. They have families, they have not here, but also back home. There's a need for support in terms of, recognizing that multiple role international students play, and step up to check on them and provide space, to cater for this kind of different needs students might have because of the multiple roles they have as students, as families, family headers and all that. So I would say there's a need to take a holistic approach in terms of understanding what international students need. As everybody else, international students are struggling to be productive in this period, and therefore there's going to be delay in terms of their timeline or their progress towards completing their degrees, their degree programs. So that might mean that extending certain deadlines or scholarships and all that. I think there's a need to recognize that, as everybody else, international students need to pause and take good care of themselves and try to be productive as much as they can. But if we kind of, there's a need not to push them to still deliver on, this deadline is because just there's an extra mile, extra level of, pressure on international students being away from their parents, being away from their home country, and many of them, not even getting the support system at the school environment, because for most of international students, the school is the prime source of support, and classes being online, the chances of meeting with classmates, chatting about these challenges is limited, and therefore they're struggling. So I think there's a need for supervisors, for graduate program directors to recognize that kind of a special challenge of international students, and to kind of be accommodative of that difficulty or challenge, and be understanding of that challenge, I think. Overall, there's emotional toll and mental health issues for international students. So both universities and student groups and And the faculty, I think there's a need to invest more on mental health needs, not just for international students, for broader, student body. But I think since we're talking about the particular vulnerabilities of international students because of their unique situation of being away from family and being away from their classmates and all that, there's a need to invest more on mental health support for international students, and also perhaps I would say special projects for them to respond to unique needs for events related to their home country. I would say, for me, for instance, I'm very much involved in human rights advocacy in Ethiopia, and I think finding a way to integrate that into the support system for students would be very helpful. So I guess it could be part of that, taking a holistic approach to what students need would be very helpful. These are unusual times, and I think it requires stepping up from everybody, including faculty, students, and university administrators, to check on international students, reflect and learn and revise their approach to international students. Crisis could be an opportunity for rethinking the way citizens relate to states. And I think as much as COVID has resulted in, unfortunately, more incidents of human rights violations, it actually has also provided a space for discussion around what should be the relationship between citizens and Ethiopian state. There's a lot of citizens or Ethiopians are very much active in politics right now because of some of these atrocities that happened following the state of emergency and the postponement of election. I think there's an active reconsideration of the relationship between Ethiopian state and Ethiopians, and that's very good. I think if we take it as an advantage and build on it, I think I'm very much excited about some of the writings coming out of how we should restructure Ethiopia in the future, what needs to happen for Ethiopia to be an inclusive democratic state, and what should be done from the government side, but also from the civil society side. So there's a lot of discussion happening and around the idea of reconsidering the way citizens are related to Ethiopia and the government relationship, and with not only Ethiopians but also civil society and even foreign actors. So I think one thing I've learned from this experience is crisis situations are also opportunities to influence the future, because when this kind of things happen, citizens are much more active than they typically would be. And there's a lot of interest that we can channel toward this positive change. Another thing is obviously, I think crises could also be a weakest point for the government. So a government that typically would dismiss concerns, I think is now kind of responsive in a certain way because of the rising and the mounting pressure. So yeah, I think there's increasing engagement from citizens, but also I would say because of this crisis mood, there's a little bit improving interest from the government side to listen to citizens. So the combined effect is that I see a possibility for shaping the way the country is moving forward in the future. So I would say, yeah, crisis could be perhaps a moment of rethinking and reflecting and charting a new path.